It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, mate, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 121 coming to you today as we record this on the very last day of July 2025. And joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack. G'day, mate. How you going?
Yeah, not bad.
How's things in Hong Kong?
Hot and steamy.
Hot and steamy. That's pretty much par for the course of July.
Until September, yep.
Well, keep that. I noticed you're wearing the black long sleever as well, as per usual. It must be said.
Yeah.
No, short sleever.
Short sleevers today.
And so you got the summer. You got the summer blacks on.
Yeah, I have. Yep. Yeah.
All right.
I'm sure it's probably good. Probably for Ozzy Osbourne. You know. I mean.
Yeah, I think that's right. I saw his wife at the grave site. You know, she just completely broke down. Obviously, a deep and abiding love, even though Ozzy was not always the best husband going around, but there was a love that endured all of that. God bless him.
And I noticed this morning, I saw a little clip of the band from the Household Guards outside Buckingham Palace playing Paranoid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rather lovely. Much loved in England, of course, and in his hometown of I've just gone blank. His hometown of
Birmingham.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
He's a rummy.
That was where the service was. We have a letter from a listener. She's just wanted to be called the listener of the show, and that is fine by us. And she wrote, "Hi, Jack and Joel. Big fan of Conditional Release and also Two Jacks. Just wanted to comment on the student debt bill discussion in the recent Two Jacks, particularly Hong Kong Jack's comments about it not being good politics. I think from memory you were kind of open about the politics, but you were a little less agreeable about the United States or the Biden administration's attempts to rein in student debt or write off student debt. Anyway, she said, university courses now run into tens of thousands depending on your degree. Young Aussies have been forever told that if you want to earn money, go and get a uni degree or a trade. Wages that have not been keeping up with inflation and the times in general. Lower threshold for payment also means more lower earning younger Australians are having to pay back debt sooner. It is a decent chunk out of your paycheck every fortnight. It takes a few years for a uni grad to start earning good money, and also same for apprentices. On top of this, uni debt is directly tied into housing affordability for my generation. That's a very good point. Your help uni debt affects your borrowing power for a mortgage, sometimes to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars, less than what you normally be able to borrow. For me personally, when my debt was a larger amount, I lost out on being able to borrow around $30,000 more, despite being on a good income at the time and capable of servicing the loan. Is it good policy? Absolutely it is, she writes. Younger Australians from my generation, millennials and below, have been screaming out for successive governments to do something that will actually benefit us as a whole. We often have been overlooked in terms of policy implementation because we have not been a large voting bloc until now. It's another very good point. There is a real mood among my generation that governments, to put it frankly, don't do shit for us and have zero interest in long-term planning around housing, cost of living and climate change. This is the first policy from any government that has actually directly provided some benefit to me since I started voting at age 18. Another very good point. Anyway, sorry for the essay, she writes, and keep doing what you're doing. Love every iteration of the pod. Jack, comment?
I can see where she's coming from. I just don't think that the whole community should be paying for university fees.
Well, we're paying a lot of tax benefits to self-funded retirees, Jack. We're paying a lot of
I'm not happy
taxes.
about that either.
Yeah, I know. This is not part of your view, but you know we are paying people who are big investors in the share market and franking credits.
Yeah, and we're paying middle class people childcare fees. I think that's wrong.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. No matter how high your income is, there
Yeah.
there is no means testing around it at all.
To me, that's nuts. I've got to say.
I take our listeners' point that that this will affect their ability to buy a house, depending on the level of debt they carry through help. And we also have to understand that, unlike the Biden administration, we did mention this last week, that this is also affecting TAFE training, and sort of not, we're not looking at the higher levels of university education. We're looking at trade skills around TAFE as well.
Yes, the US situation is different in this sense that in the US it is the majority of the population who don't go to university, and that's still a big majority in the United States.
Yeah, that's good.
Who are paying for the well-off who do, and that's flat out wrong. It's a little bit better in Australia, but I also think we've encouraged too many people to go to university, to be quite honest.
Oh, well, this is the Nick Cater stuff, mate. No one have the working class with an education. I'm never bought into that. Back in my day, and possibly yours, Jack, I think there was a direct encouragement for a lot of people to go to university that didn't really want to go there. HECS debts or help debts, I think, sort of changed that significantly. I mean, you and I went to university for free, mate. So perhaps we should be a little bit quiet about education and training in this country. God bless you, Gough Whitlam. Spent 5 years of basically misspent time there on the taxpayer. All right, the round table. We love a good summit on the two Jacks, don't we, Jack?
We do.
And it seems like, you got us through it. We are looking at a round table to deal with productivity, I believe.
Yeah, that's the idea of it. And I think it was Paul Kelly in the Oz who made a very good point that this is a chance for Chalmers to leave some kind of legacy as treasurer if he takes it up. But I think Kelly's right about this. That means taking some risks and putting some political capital on the line. Well,
they got a fair bit to burn, Jack, haven't
they? They have.
They're God only knows how they fit all the reps into their offices at the moment. The way the lower house sits is that Labor MPs are all the way on the opposition side. And look, you do have, and not to say that you want to waste careers and all that sort of stuff, but you do have an enormous amount of political capital. I saw some polling yesterday from Essential. I mean, the Liberal Party is in utter turmoil. Well, they are in turmoil, but more so they just seem to have, the electorate switched off to them. So there is capital to, there'd be no better time to do it. I mean, when Hawke and Keating undertook their summits and reforms to the Australian economy, Hawke certainly didn't have the benefit of Albo's margins.
No, he didn't have that margin. He had a lot of political capital because he was a very, very popular prime minister, and the people were kind of in lockstep behind him to a very large extent. But he didn't have a big margin of error, yet he was prepared to risk that and to take chances and to do things that were going to annoy a lot of people in order to get the economy up and going again. And that's the challenge, I think, that faces Chalmers. Is he brave enough to take that chance?
Well, can I put that question another way, Jack? I'd say Chalmers is brave enough, but is Albo brave enough to adopt it?
Well, that's the difference, isn't it? Both Hawke and Keating, they didn't agree on exactly how it should happen, but they both had plenty of courage.
Yeah.
And my instincts are that it's not Albo's best
not his greatest asset.
No.
He's a very handsome man, of course, according to the Chinese, Jack. Just to cover this, and this is, I guess, coming from Paul's piece, productivity that used to average growth of more than 2% a year in the Hawke, Keating and Howard years has been languishing at 1.2% for the past 15 years. As Professor Richard Holden said in the Australian Financial Review on July 20, at 2.5% growth in productivity, or I guess a 2.5 level, living standards double every 28 years, but rise only by a third with productivity growth at 1%. There you go. I was looking at our GDP projections yesterday, Jack. According to one of the major economic groups around, and we have got very pedestrian growth going to 2050. With our economy, the GDP of our economy currently running about 2.65 trillion, will head to about 4 trillion by 2050, which is, of course, 25 years away. So no doubling.
Chalmers says these are the areas that he wants to concentrate on: delivering quality care, data and digital technology, economic dynamism and resilience, a skilled and adaptable workforce, and the net zero transformation. None of those are really inspiring. None of those say, look, we're going to get this economy moving.
Housing's one of those things, Jack. Housing is really actually cruelling productivity. And if people have got to travel 2 hours in the train, two and then another 2 from, if they're running okay, it's going to be affecting the productivity of that particular employee. So these are other big things they're going to really try and fix and spend a bit of capital on, Jack.
And the political capital risk really is that everything you do at that level of government is going to annoy somebody.
Yeah. I mean, that was
you just have to be prepared to do it.
That was one of the things that Obama said about being president. That anything that came across his desk could not be easily solved. That's why it got to his desk, and the only solutions would mean that at least a third of people would be disadvantaged. So it's all about trying to get it right, I guess, morally and ethically right, but also understanding that reform takes courage because there is going to be some political backlash.
You're going to have some skin off if you do it properly.
If you do it properly, that's right. All right, moving on. We did have, and I wrote about this yesterday, the UN Climate Change Executive Secretary. I don't know that that's his full title now. Simon Steele, Jack. He said that if climate change in Australia, by 2050, we could say fresh fruit and veg would be a once-a-year treat. I said, I only really eat my vegetables once every 3 years, so it's going to be a bit of a jump for me. But he went on to make some rather strange comments about the economy. That's why I was looking at Australia's GDP, where he mentioned that the sort of hit to our GDP was about, 2/3 larger than our GDP, Jack. So it was all a bit of a back-of-the-envelope job.
As to his predictions, I saw this yesterday. It's a comment on an Al Gore made a big announcement about the EPA, and this comment followed him on social media. Sir, I followed your climate projections for decades. May I observe that your track record seems unblemished by success, and that's rather what I think of the UN climate change.
Mr. Steele is a Grenadian, Jack, a wonderful part of the world in the Caribbean. Now, look, it's not his fault, but the island of Grenada, in fact, there's a couple of islands in the island nation, Grenada, they use diesel. They haven't progressed to, you would think it was a fairly straightforward matter to go to solar, but they haven't done that. About 90% of their electricity supply is done through diesel. And so Mr. Steele perhaps should have a bit of a look at that. Then I looked at the cost of living in Grenada, Jack, and it's pretty good, except for electricity. Electricity is really expensive in Grenada. But everything else is on a par, if not cheaper than it is in Australia. The cigarettes, for a start, but we understand why that is. But even a beer costs you about half of what it costs in Australia, and the same goes for fruit and veg. Look, I guess overall, this kind of alarmism, I'm a person who accepts the science. It's not about belief, it's accept the science. And I've come to an acceptance of the science because I look at our own climate issues in Australia, and we've had many, many cataclysms in this country. It's not to say that we haven't had them before, but the rate of these things is starting to becoming troubling. But one thing, when you come up with this sort of catastrophist view of the world, I think people are just going to switch off.
They do.
We've heard it so many times, and the better thing would be to say, look at your weather patterns, look at the number of serious climate events you have, be it drought or flood or storms, and then make your own judgment around that. The alarmist approach is it's really silly, really silly.
But there is a career in being a catastrophist. Al Gore's made something like $300 million US out of this since he left office as vice president.
Well, what are we doing, Jack? What are we doing? Why aren't we cashing in on this? We could come up with all sorts of alarmist stuff.
Well, the difference is that when Al Gore first went to college, he was studying theology. So he's a Southern Baptist preacher by nature.
Bible thumper.
So he's got the skills. He's got the skills to go out there and talk about the world's going to end.
All right. Social media ban. This is sort of getting a lot of traction now. For example, Jack, I got very annoyed when I was trying to watch the cricket on Sunday in the West Indies, and I had to sign into my Disney account. So it's not just the social media; it's also the streamers. And I thought, is this part of it? And of course, it is. I had to put in my date of birth, an email address, and I had to offer my thoughts on what gender I was, or not offer one at all, which I just thought was fairly intrusive. And I think people are starting to see this stuff come through now, and they'll see it coming through on YouTube, Facebook. If you've listed your Facebook account, let's say the date of birth you provided makes you 15, your account will just simply stop. And so all these things, these things have been obviously forecast. And some people say, well, the government said that they weren't going to throw YouTube in, and they obviously have. And I think we're at the sort of pointy end of it now. Having said that, Jack, this is I'm told this is just an absolute vote winner. I mean, parents of teenagers and kids or wannabe parents, they love this stuff.
What's her name? Julie Inman Grant.
Yes.
The scold, who is the e-safety commissioner, had something to say. Up to 4 in 10 of young people under the age of 16 who've engaged with YouTube have been harmed. I'd want to know more before.
Yeah, you'd want to know a little bit more about the nature of that harm.
Yeah. That just strikes me as, this is more of the Al Gore stuff.
Look. We have talked about on this program and on the conditional release program. Look, this sort of online harassment that does occur, online exploitation, sexploitation that does occur. Most of this stuff actually wanders through, shall we say, the fringe of the internet. A number of victims who were subject to exploitation were picked out of gaming platforms and gaming social media sites, which presumably will be affected by this. But I think if you're sort of trying to stamp out this kind of behaviour, this is probably the wrong approach. I'm very, very sympathetic towards those people who have been subject to outrageous behaviour from horrible, horrible people online. But I think the best way to deal with that is through a sort of, through basically a public awareness campaign rather than the ban.
Tell me, did you get a thrill? I mean, I always think, I haven't been to Australia for quite some time. But, at the fine old age of, late 60s, if ever I'm asked to prove my age when I go for a drink, it's, being carded at my age there's certain thrill involved in this.
There was no time for thrills, Jack. The game was underway, and I was trying to watch it, and I had to go through this horrible process. The others, as far as I can tell, haven't done that unless I've given my data to them. It bothers me too that iView, which is ABC program streamer, and the SBS ones have always required a registration and an email and all that sort of stuff. I mean,
and they geo-block those of us who are not in the country, I can tell you.
Yeah, there you go. So,
which makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah,
really,
look, there is a question of data. Right, and I'd like to be convinced. I mean, YouTube and these others, but let's say Disney streamers, I would like to be convinced that they have security around their data, that it won't be hacked at some point, and we're constantly being made aware of companies. I still haven't got my letter from Qantas, but I'm a Qantas member, and they were hacked just recently. So I can't. Well, maybe I was lucky enough to avoid being hacked, but these things happen all the time, and we are giving away more data all the time. That's not part of this equation or this policy so much. A lot of our friends in the freedom movement will say, the government, can watch us at any given time through mobile phones and all this sort of stuff. We actually actively give away our data when we sign on to Google products or Apple products. We actually give them the Bunnings ID theft kit whenever we do these things, Jack, and you've always got to wonder how secure it all is.
Yeah. Well, this is not a peculiarly Australian thing. The UK have just started a similar law in the UK. And in France, it's gotten to the point where a French court is in a battle with Twitter, demanding access to the algorithms, etc., because they think the fact that they can't get access to the algorithms and policies means that Twitter is basically a criminal gang or engaging in criminal activity. So that will play out at great cost to everybody except for the lawyers, I would think.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, look, certainly X, formerly known as Twitter, has changed. I mean, you can see the way it's changed. It's not just that they've opened up accounts that had been suspended or barred, but there's a different algorithm running through X now than it was. You're seeing a lot of very unpleasant stuff pop up. But that'll be really interesting.
I never get that, I've got to tell you. I don't think I see anything unpleasant in a week.
No, fair enough. I must say, in defence of X, when I look at Instagram on occasions, I see some very nutty, extreme right stuff pop up all the time. I mean,
I don't get it all the time, but I get it. I don't spend much time on Instagram, but I see it occasionally. But I can go week after week after week without seeing anything that I would think is dangerous or particularly nasty. Some of it's a bit acerbic. Sometimes people lose their temper, all that kind of stuff.
But that used to happen anyway.
Yeah, and that's just human nature. You can't have sort of the free exchange of ideas without a certain amount of that. That's just how people are,
I know Joel is particularly fond of the idea that of the Nazi algorithm running through X. I would say the stuff I see on Instagram is worse. And it's a lot of bot stuff. It's a lot of, very partisan political stuff around Trump and what have you. It's some very nutty stuff there. Short films and so forth. Obviously it feeds into TikTok and all that sort of stuff too. I think this is a tweet, Jack. So I'll just quickly read it, and you might think where it came from. Australian government just admitted what we all knew. To ban under 16s, everyone will have to upload their ID. Well, not quite. The government will be able to track any X or Facebook posts. No VPN will save you. Well, that's not true. That's certainly not true. But anyway, where did that come from, you remember?
That came from X. I included it because I thought, well, that's the kind of reaction you're going to get. I don't know what the politics of all this, how they're going to play out in Australia and in the United Kingdom. But I know that in the UK, it's been going on a little bit longer, and the government is having to be very defensive. So I'm not sure how well it's playing out there.
Look, I wrote my opposition to these things some time ago. Bear in mind, I've also written about online sexploitation and those sorts of hideous things. But I very quickly realised that parents love this stuff. There's a broad community support for it. It's up around the 80 percentile, and that's, in my way, another reason to be cautious about it, because essentially what parents are saying is, look, we can't control our kids, so can the government do it? So it's abrogating parental responsibility, isn't it? That's why parents love it.
Yeah, in a sense, parents have never been able to control their teenage kids to a large extent, right? They weren't able to when we were growing up, right?
Well, it's probably a lot worse. It's probably a lot worse now in terms of just a fear of what kids are looking at. And look, we know Telegram, you've got to be 16 to jump on there. I think it's 16 on X, had been anyway. Some of these other things are 12 and 14, particularly around gaming platforms, where some of these awful human beings lurk. And yeah, I just don't know that. Like you, I'm uncomfortable about prohibitions.
Yeah, I first of all, I think they generally don't work all that well, and
that's the other thing.
And they always cause more problems than you would expect.
I suspect there'll be quite a lot of new Facebook accounts, Jack. With
of course there will be.
With 20-something-year-old 14-year-olds having their accounts there. Same with Insta, TikTok, etc.
The other thing, of course, is that if it's going to be a battle between the boffins in Canberra trying to control access and the endlessly inventive and clever 14 and 16-year-olds out in the community, I know who I'd have my money on winning.
Exactly right. Just quickly before we move on, YouTube, Jack, is there any reason why it should be exempt? My little granddaughter, who's just on 2, there's this hideous American kids program that you can only find on YouTube, so she loves that. I get the family package of YouTube, so no advertising and all that sort of stuff. But they just jacked up their sub to about, I think it's now more than $40 a month. And so I did have to let my daughter know that my granddaughter might not be able to watch a show without ads for much longer. I just don't use it enough to get any value out of that.
Yeah, well, I don't watch much television, but after dinner, if I'm just relaxing before I'm going to bed, I'm a sucker for finding old sports programs on YouTube. You know, old horse races or old AFL matches, VFL matches. You know,
don't the ads annoy you? Because they'll just break in. There's no sort of.
I don't seem to get too many ads. I don't pay anything for it, or perhaps.
I think just the individual account might be around $20, but the family one where you can have up to, I think it's half a dozen users. I think it's. Well, they just dropped me a line a couple of weeks ago saying it's going up, and it was 40 or near enough, and I think it's going to almost 50 now. So.
Yeah, well, I don't pay
too much for that. Too much for my blood, and so I might I'll put up with the ads. If you're watching anything of any length on YouTube, they'll just break into ads halfway. Someone will just be talking, and then it'll cut to an ad. Then you might have 2, and then you might have 3, and then it'll cut back to the show. It is annoying, but for me, I just don't use it enough.
I think my wife's got. I do see ads, but they don't annoy me. I think my wife's got a Netflix account, but I don't know how to operate it. But
come on, mate, it's really not that hard.
Yeah, I just never bothered really. The only sub I pay is for your newspaper for the Australian.
The best way to review it, I've found, is ring up the bank and say, "Can you send me a new card?" And And that means all these automatic transactions get cancelled, and then you can pick the ones off you want. I did this about a year ago. I did lose my bank card. So it was actually a very good way. Like, Washington Post, what am I paying there? New York Times. And some of them are very, very expensive. I think the Australian, the Australian one just went up too, Jack. But I shouldn't talk about that too much, otherwise people stop reading me.
Yeah, and I've got a few American friends who'll cut and paste the interesting bits out of pieces in the Washington Post, or et cetera, et cetera. And there is a hack you can get in the back of the New York Times, I can tell you.
I can tell you right now, and having spoken to a few techs, the Australian paywall is virtually unbreachable. I don't know what they've done there. It's very easy to use once you are a subscriber, but it is an expensive sub. And all of these things are very, very expensive now. Between the family, I've got, Disney. I've got virtually every streaming thing, but other people will hold the accounts. I've got the Netflix. I've got Foxtel. In fact, I don't think I have Netflix anymore. I've got Foxtel and I've got YouTube. But yeah, overall, if you put it all together, you wouldn't get much change out of $200 a month just on streamers.
Wow. What's that? That's 1,000 honkies.
Well, the Foxtel's just gone up. That's around, I'm going to say off the top of my head, around 70. Netflix, it's getting in on 25 now. As I say, YouTube around 40, going up to 50. So it's a fair chunk of change. It's almost an invisible loss. You don't really feel it till you have a long, hard look at it.
Jack, I couldn't do that because that would cut into my budget for my monthly bar tab.
Well, that's where you pick up most of your news, Jack. So you can't have that. Yes. All right, yeah. Pauline Hanson, net zero motion. Gee, that's got a big chance of getting up. The WA Libs. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, it didn't. It was it went to a vote yesterday or the day before, I think. So
yeah. Now, the Western Australian Libs, they've decided that they're going to ditch net zero. Of course, this is something the Nats haven't quite announced that they're going to do, but they almost certainly will. The WA Libs, you got to have a bit of a snigger there, don't you? It's like, well, sorry, how many people, how many representatives do you have now, and how many people are voting for you?
Paul Kelly wrote a piece saying that it was a sort of an act of political self-harm, and my reaction to that was, in the case of the WA Libs, well, it's a bit late.
It's a bit late for a party that, as I've said on a number of occasions, caucuses under a doona. Now they've got Basil. Well, Basil actually came out and sort of broke the mould, because the WA Libs had said, just the one flag, please, not the Indigenous flag and not the Torres Strait Islander flag, and good old
Basil Zempilas.
Yeah, Basil said no, can't see a problem with it. Interesting. A Liberal Party in a state that seems to be going nowhere. And while I mention Liberal Party dysfunction, the Liberal Party is just in the Supreme Court now. It's be lucky to get to the Parliament. In and out of the Supreme Court all the time. And there's a current defo, which we won't get into today because it's a little bit sensitive around the deputy leader of the Liberal Party. And he's taking the Herald Sun, or in fact Nationwide News, to court. And he's also relying on Victoria's new tort laws, Jack, tort privacy laws.
Yeah, okay.
And we might have a bit of a look at that next week. But far more serious, Jack, is Cambodia and Thailand are really in a state of conflict. I mean, armed conflict.
Yeah, well, they were. They seem to have reached a ceasefire, but it was quite nasty for quite a few days.
Yeah. I mean,
serious.
What was the cause of it, Jack?
Not just the odd exchange. Well, it's. As far as I can tell, it goes back to where the boundaries were drawn when the French were the colonialists in the area, in Cambodia at least.
Yes.
And that's sort of remained unresolved for 100 years.
what would be the strength of Cambodia's army?
Not much would be my guess, but it's sort of a strange situation. Cambodia has sort of become a little bit more like a Chinese satellite than anything else. A hell of a lot of Chinese investment. The beachside towns are full of, Chinese casino type operations, all that sort of stuff.
And I noticed too that President Trump, refused to negotiate a trade deal with. I think it went beyond Thailand and Cambodia until the fighting stopped.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So that would be a fairly strong incentive to cut it out.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the current chair of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, is Anwar Ibrahim, the Malaysian Prime Minister, and he was chairing meetings, and they seem to have been able to resolve it. But I mean, Thailand's a significant economic power, and Cambodia is not.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. I mean, if it came to a stoush, it'd be fairly over a period of time. It'd be a fairly one-sided one, I imagine.
Yeah,
Thailand's basically run by the military, no matter who's in power, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And Cambodia, I mean, even if you go to Siem Reap, it's just a dusty village, really. With a whole lot of resort hotels, but still just a dusty village. So.
Yes. I'm going to Thailand a little bit later in the year, Jack. A mate of mine has made his retirement plans. A Hong Konger, ex-Australian, and he's got, what's the island called? What's the...
Koh Samui?
Koh Samui. He's setting up shop in Koh Samui for retirement. So he hasn't extended an invitation. I think he's bought the villa, but hasn't extended an invitation, but that doesn't matter. We'll just turn up, knock on the door. Anyway, so that's been planned between my mate who lives in Vancouver and myself and him in Hong Kong. Anyway, moving on to far more serious matters in the Middle East, Jack. The prospect of a Palestinian state is being raised, and I think it might be a little bit precipitous because we do have an enormous human tragedy unfolding there pretty much as we speak. There was a photograph that was taken in Gaza that I think went around the world. It certainly ran on front pages of all major newspapers of a Palestinian boy in a state of advanced malnutrition, difficult to look at. And that photograph really did bring about a change to the way aid is being distributed. The Israelis, for the first time in many months, dropped, and I think the Americans too, dropped food aid out of planes.
This is the photo that the New York Times walked back yesterday.
Well, tell me. I've been head down, bum up. You tell me what happened there.
If it's the same photo, the New York Times had about a third of its front page with this kid on it.
This ran on every major Australian newspaper, as I say.
Yeah, and the New York Times issued a correction saying that the child had underlying medical conditions that caused the problem.
Yeah, okay. I mean, still, we see these things, they are kind of almost symbolic, as appalling as that might sound, that represents a sort of much broader issue around.
It's very embarrassing for the New York Times, I've got to tell you.
If that is the photo, I might while we have a bit of you have a bit of a chat about the likelihood of a Palestinian state. Might have a quick look at that. We've got we've got Antonio Guterres who says, "Let's be clear: statehood for Palestinians is a right, not a reward. The only realistic, just, and sustainable solution is two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace. I urge the international community to take urgent and concrete steps to make it real." Go through some of those others, and I'll just have a quick look at this, Jack.
The problem with the two-state solution is that Israel doesn't want it, and really neither the PLA nor Hamas have wanted it in the past. Whether they do now is another question, and I think that's not a problem that's going to go away. Bob Carr has been out and about as always.
Yes, he has.
He's about as pro-Palestinian as possible. He used to be a good friend of Israel, was Bob, but not have been that way for a long time. Look, I still keep getting back to the important people to have a look at in all of this are the Arab nations, and they now say they want a two-state solution, but it comes with a condition, and that is that Hamas disarms and leaves Gaza, effectively surrenders.
Look, I could see that being. Perhaps that would break the gridlock. There some really interesting ways of going about it. I cannot see how a two-state solution can function the way things are. I think really it's people like Bob Carr and Antonio Guterres and Kasparov and others. Gazans really need to go through a major humanitarian exercise. I just have checked that, and I suppose many of our listeners will already know this, but I didn't. That photo, yes, there has been a clarification. There was existing medical issues around that, but I mean, I think that's sort of abundance of caution, really, because you've got a kid who we've got Gazans who are just not having enough to eat and not having medical support. So that's got to happen first. And these things have to be sorted out. Reconstruction needs to occur. Those things have to occur before we can start contemplating how a two-state solution might work.
I don't think this two-state solution can work with Hamas left in situ. And I think the Arab states know that as well.
Yes. I'm not sure where this comes from, Jack. What would a Palestinian state look like? Who would run it? I'm not sure. But the Arab League, which includes Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, also condemned for the first time Hamas' massacre. This is just very recent, the October 7, 2023. Yeah. And so we do have a lot of concern in the Arab world. And I know there's been a lot of finger-pointing at the Qataris, Jack, from the Arab world.
There was a long interview I saw with the Saudi foreign minister giving the Qataris a thorough beating, I've got to say, thorough verbal beating.
Yeah. Certainly they've been part of the nexus. I did mention the interview that I'd watched previously with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who maintains he's actually one of the Epstein files names, Jack, too. Very close with Jeffrey Epstein.
He was a frequent visitor to the townhouse in New York. Yes.
Yes. And he maintains that
for what reason we don't know.
No, we make no comment about it other than.
Yeah. But he was a visitor. He was a regular visitor there. Yeah.
But Barak was making a claim last week, which is a significant one and probably needs to be investigated in a just and fair world. But that under Netanyahu, large amounts of money were forwarded into Qatar. Large amounts of Israeli money were forwarded into Qatar, knowing that it would end up in the hands of Hamas. Now, that's an allegation. That's not proven, but that's what Barak is saying.
And I got to say, look, those sort of things are possible. The Middle East is a messy place, and people will fund, whether that,
Well, if it was done deliberately, Jack, then that's a real issue. I don't know how you would prove that. I read a piece in The Atlantic. It's a piece written by a Jewish reporter who works for The Atlantic. He's on staff there. His name is Yair Rosenberg. And look, I'd just like listeners to bear with me while I read it. It's a long piece, but it's some of the most balanced analysis that I have read for a good long time on Gaza as it stands. So bear with me, folks. When the article starts, when Benjamin Netanyahu returned to power in 2022 after a brief period of political exile, he did so on the backs of the most extreme allies in Israeli history. 14 of his coalition's 64 seats were held by parties led by two explicitly anti-Arab lawmakers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. Ben-Gvir had been charged and convicted of support for terrorism and racist incitement. He was a disciple of Meir Kahane, a rabbi who called for the expulsion of Israel's Arabs and whose political party was banned from parliament for its radicalism. Smotrich had advocated segregating Jews and Arabs in Israeli maternity wards and told his Arab colleagues in the Knesset that they were enemies who were here by mistake. Both Ben-Gvir and Smotrich expressed sympathy for violent settler attacks in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Both sought to annex the West Bank and disenfranchise or expel the Palestinians living there. And both became ministers in Netanyahu's new government because the Israeli leader desperately needed their support. Just a bit of background. So moving on. The math was simple. The parties in Netanyahu's coalition received just 48.4% of the vote and attained a parliamentary majority only through a quirk of the Israeli electoral system. This meant that Netanyahu entered into office in a profoundly precarious position, on trial for corruption and beholden to extremists who could bring him down if he buckled to their demands. Recognising how bad this arrangement looked from the outside, Netanyahu embarked on an international PR campaign to assure outsiders that he, not the extremists, was running the show. They are joining me, he told NPR, the US
great ad.
Yeah, free country. Anyway, NPR. I'm not joining them, he said. They are joining me. I'm not joining them. The trajectory of the war in Gaza has conclusively disproved this spin. At crucial junctures, the Prime Minister's choices have been corrupted by the need to cater to those with the ability to end his grip on power. As a result, he has undermined Israel's war effort and shredded the country's international standing abroad. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the events that precipitated the Gaza hunger crisis. Israel was faced with a dilemma after Hamas butchered some 1,200 Israelis and took hundreds more hostage. The United Nations Relief Works Agency was the only actor capable of delivering humanitarian aid to the civilians of Gaza during the ensuing war, but the UNRWA was compromised by Hamas, which siphoned supplies for itself and sold them at a markup to fund its operations. Although the extent of this co-option is disputed, the fact of it cannot be denied. Employees of the organisation were among the perpetrators of the October 7 atrocities, as even the UN itself has acknowledged. Hostages have testified that they were held by UNRWA staff or in UNRWA facilities. All aid goes down, that is underground to Hamas, and does not reach the nation, an elderly Palestinian woman told Al Jazeera in December 2023. Everything goes to their houses. They take it. They will even shoot me and do whatever they want to me, Hamas. Hamas has obscured its subversion of aid by intimidating aid workers, civilians and media outlets. In the early days of the war, the terrorist group reportedly looted fuel and medical supplies from UNRWA's headquarters in Gaza City. The aid organisation initially disclosed this on social media, but then deleted the post. It had good reason to worry. More than a decade ago, a senior UNRWA officer in Gaza attempted to investigate whether any of the organisation's local employees were moonlighting with Hamas. He received a funeral bouquet in the mail and later a live grenade, at which point he was evacuated from the territory. According to the New York Times, Matthias Schmal, the head of UNRWA in Gaza from 2017 to 2021, gave a TV interview that upset Hamas. He was pushed out of his position after the group informed UNRWA that it could no longer guarantee his security. Would I be totally surprised if at the end of the day there is proof that 2,000 UNRWA staff are members of Hamas? Schmal told the paper. No, I wouldn't be, though it would be a bit shocking if it is such a high number. Faced with this predicament, as well as pressure from the Biden administration to allow more aid, Israel had several credible options for providing humanitarian assistance. Starting on day one of its ground invasion, the army could have begun building a new aid mechanism for Gaza civilians by setting up non-UNRWA distribution centres in conjunction with local and international partners in each area where it assumed control. Or Israel could simply have flooded the enclave with so much aid that Hamas would not be able to resell it for significant value. This latter option had the downside of inevitably funneling food and fuel to Hamas in its tunnels, perversely bolstering the group's fight against the country supplying it. But realistically speaking, there was no way to starve Hamas out of its well-stocked underground fortress without first starving the desperate Gazan civilian population, which, as ever, served as the group's human shield. Israel chose neither of these options. Instead, it allowed UNRWA to continue limited operations while repeatedly tightening and relaxing restrictions in response to complaints about the diversion of aid. Israel then agreed to surge supplies into the territory during the 42-day ceasefire in January, only to completely blockade all aid for 2 months afterwards. Finally, with Gaza on the brink, Israel and the United States launched the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in May, attempting at last, to displace UNRWA. This effort to implement an entirely new system on the fly under the worst possible conditions unsurprisingly failed. Both Israeli troops and Hamas killed Palestinians trying to reach the distribution sites, and food prices in Gaza skyrocketed, culminating in the crisis we see today. Israel's choices here are contradictory and do not make moral or strategic sense, but they do make political sense from Netanyahu's perspective. Since the start of the war, the Prime Minister has contended with pressures from opposing directions, from international partners insisting that he sustain Gaza civilians, and from the right flank of his coalition, which seeks to ethnically cleanse those civilians and repopulate the area with Jewish settlements. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich have explicitly called for the voluntary migration of the area's Palestinian population and advocated ending humanitarian aid as a lever to achieve it. The only way to win the war and bring back the hostages is to completely stop the humanitarian aid, conquer the entire Gaza Strip, and encourage voluntary migration, Ben-Gvir declared on Saturday. That's just last week on social media. To keep this faction in check and keep himself in power, Netanyahu needed to ensure that the choices he made could satisfy not just military imperatives or international diktats, but also the hard rights demands. Every step he authorised had to be dual use, ostensibly for a strategic purpose, but also capable of potentially advancing the far right's plan. In practice, pursuing these two goals at the same time is incompatible with a just and successfully prosecuted war. It is impossible to provide aid and also withhold it, to pursue a limited war against Hamas to free hostages and also a war of conquest. The longer the conflict has gone on, the more obvious the compromised nature of Netanyahu's decision-making has become. Initially, the Israeli leader was restrained by pressure from the Biden administration, in parentheses, which pushed for more aid and compelled Netanyahu to reject Gazan displacement. Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, who insisted that Gaza be returned to Palestinian governance, and the centrist wartime coalition partner Benny Gantz, who advocated for a ceasefire. But Gantz left the coalition in June 2024. Joe Biden was replaced by Donald Trump in November. Netanyahu fired Gallant the day Trump won. And then Trump himself proposed relocating the Gazan population in order to construct a Riviera in the Middle East. The result today, the only pressure on Netanyahu is from the far right, which is effectively running his war policy against the desires of a large majority of Israelis who oppose settlements in Gaza and support a hostage deal to end the war. I won't go on. I would recommend anyone read it, and it's in the current issue online of The Atlantic, Jack. Pretty balanced and comprehensive coverage, I think, of what's going on there.
Oh, well, he's got a particular view of what's happening inside of the Israeli government, and I've read quite a few different views of that. The Israelis are a rather disputatious lot, and that would be one of a number of ways of looking at that. There's a wide spectrum of ideas and of views there, and no one much agrees.
Well, you do have the simple what John Howard called the iron law of mathematics. And if those far right individuals and political parties decide to pull out of the coalition, that's the end of Netanyahu, right? That's the end of his political life. So that's essentially what he's saying here, and that not so much, we can talk about Trump and Trump being the end of all, the start of all their problems, which I don't think is correct. But simply now, Netanyahu is facing more and more pressure from overseas, from the UK, from France, from places like Australia as well, to resolve the humanitarian problems, and he still has to do that while he has to placate these far right political parties, or lose his job. So that's essentially where we're at. You as the journalist mentioned, you can't. These things are incompatible. You can't do one. You can't provide aid while you withhold it.
It's hard to imagine an Israeli government that was made up of all the different factions they have there who wouldn't have contradictions like that.
Yeah, but when we are talking about, in the case of Gavir's party, and we are talking about a really extreme form of ultra-Zionism, aren't we, Jack?
Yeah, but whoever's prime minister is going to have contradictions within their own government. They're going to have people whose views are hard to make coexist. That's true of whoever becomes prime minister when Netanyahu goes, and I expect he will go. He will bear the cost of October 7th happening on his watch.
Yeah, well, that seems to be so far in the background now. I'll just finish this because it is. I probably sort of hit it off or cut it off just at the end. This is the journalist's view. Today, the only pressure on Netanyahu is from the far right, which is effectively running his war policy against the desires of a large majority of Israelis. I did read that bit. Who oppose settlements in Gaza and support a hostage deal to end the war. This bleak reality and its consequences explain the growing alienation of many of even Israel's strongest international allies. After October 7, Israel's partners may have thought they were interfacing with a typical, if deeply conservative, Israeli government. Now they actually seem to be dealing with a Smotrich, Ben-Gvir government in a Netanyahu-shaped trench coat. Belatedly, a group of European countries, as well as Britain, Australia and Canada, are attempting, without American assistance, to reimpose the pressures that might compel Netanyahu to change course. Hamas has agency in all this. It chose to launch the October 7 attack knowing that it would provoke a devastating response. It chooses to hold hostages in underground dungeons under inhumane conditions. It chooses to hide within and beneath Gaza's civilians. It chooses to appropriate aid intended for those civilians to fuel its messianic war machine. Israel also faces prejudice and unfair expectations that would not be faced by many other countries in such circumstances. But Netanyahu has agency in how he chooses to respond to these realities. He has made his choice, and Palestinians and Israelis will continue to pay the price for it until he makes a different one. And that's how it wraps up.
Yeah, at the moment, I think Canada yesterday joined the France and the UK in saying they want a two-state solution. The Australian Prime Minister will agree with them when he gets a dose of courage, but that's not going to make much difference, because what really matters is what the US decides it's going to do, and what the Arab neighbours decide they're going to do. And I think their position is right, that this can only be resolved with the removal of Hamas. And until then, I don't think it will be resolved.
I would go so far as to say it can only be done with the removal of Netanyahu and Hamas.
Well,
now the Israelis have got elections. It's actually quite a long way off. I think it's next year. Can't think of the month, but sort of mid-year next year. That will be something of a valve or a pressure release.
He will almost certainly lose government. The history of Israel is if you are in charge when there's an attack like this, you bear the price of it, and he will bear the price of it, I expect. People seem to be overexcited, in my view, as to the amount of sway public opinion and even government opinion in the West has in Israel, The former Prime Minister Golda Meir put it quite well a long time ago. I think after the 67 war, or might have been the 73 Yom Kippur War. If we have a choice between being dead and pitied, she said, and being alive with a bad image, we'd rather be alive and have the bad image. And that, I think, is ingrained into the body politic in Israel.
Well, that photograph of that young boy in Gaza, as I say, ran around the world, and the New York Times has clarified the context of that photo. But in the wake of that photo's release around the world, Jack, Israel, for the first time in months, was dropping aid out of aeroplanes for the first time in months. So there is a sense that you can't keep offending people in this way. All right, let's move on because we've got much to get through still. Donald Trump, of course, been out there. Did you see him cheating at the Gough, mate? See that?
I did.
Yeah, it's just a little drop from the caddy there, and oh dear. But he has offered some free advice to the Europeans on immigration.
I was talking to a couple of golfers last night, and they were laughing at the little bit of a cheat there. But they also said, and I haven't played golf for a long, long time, they say he's actually pretty good.
Oh, he hits the ball. I mean, you see him tee off, and that, you can't really fix that. And he doesn't hit it, I imagine, a long way, but he hits it pretty straight.
Well, the other day when he was playing for the first time at one of the courses that he's got a share in Scotland, he teed up on the first tee, probably 150.
Yeah, sure. A bit of pressure on.
150 journos standing round, and he hit it straight down the middle, a couple of hundred yards. I mean, that's not bad.
Well, he did have a bit of free advice on immigration. He told the Europeans, in a broad sense, on immigration, better get your act together, or you're not going to have Europe anymore. You've got to get your act together. Last month we had nobody entering our country. Nobody. Shut it down. We took out a lot of bad people that got there with Biden. And there we go. Biden was a total stiff, and what he allowed to happen, but you're allowing it to happen to your countries, and you got to stop this horrible invasion that's happening to Europe. Many countries in Europe, some people, some leaders have not let it happen, and they're not getting the proper credit they should. I could name them to you right now, but I'm not going to embarrass the other ones. But stop. This immigration is killing Europe, he says. Well, that's Donald Trump's view of the world, Jack, or certainly a view of Europe.
Every morning when I have a look at the papers, there are more and more stories. This is a running sore in Europe at the moment.
Oh, it is. There are incredible pressures. These things are being driven, yes, by perception around immigration being too high. You've also got a sense of an uncontrolled immigration coming from Africa and coming from the Middle East to a degree, and South Asia, and I mean Afghanistan in particular, and then it just gets thrown into the cauldron with cost of living issues, with the cost of energy issues, these sorts of things, which create social pressures anyway. And we are looking at people sort of saying, well, how do we fix this? Now, if you want to go to zero immigration, which is what Trump has suggested there, these economies will falter. And we really, I mean, they've all got fairly tepid growth, including the United States, by the way. But they'll go backwards. I mean, one thing they've learnt from Brexit, they can barely talk about it now in their own political sphere. It's led to, it's left to, sort of your sort of celebrity types to raise these issues. The UK has suffered significant loss to its economic growth through Brexit, which was always about immigration anyway. No one sort of asked the right questions about these things, Jack.
Well, I can tell you that in Ireland this week there have been protests where the anti-immigration protests where the protesters are specifically calling for the remigration of people. This is where we're at. in Europe today.
Yeah, I mean, we are, and we are sort of also in a part of like, do we deal with the squeaky wheel? Do we deal with that one first? Do we deal with the extremists who get out there and satisfy them? I mean, you know, some of these groups, particularly in Ireland, I know who they are, Jack. They are a very distinct minority in Ireland. Most of which, if you look at polling at least, support immigration. What they might not support is perhaps a sort of loss of control or a perceived loss of control.
I just think it's ugly and going to get uglier.
Look, I would agree with you in that respect, most definitely. Oh, of course, while we're still in Europe, Jack, Trump in Scotland, of course, firing golf balls around the place, magnificent posters from protesters there that don't normally, with words on them that don't normally get printed, but that was that. And there's been a trade deal with the EU, and not everyone is totally happy about it, particularly in Europe, Jack.
No, they're not.
The French jumping up and down?
Yes, the French Prime Minister said it was a dark day for Europe, and the Trade Minister said this matter is not settled. Viktor Orban from Hungary accused von der Leyen, President von der Leyen from the EU, of being a lightweight.
Featherweight, I think he's gone, Jack. He's gone underneath. You know, you can. There's still a few weight categories to go down below featherweight, but yeah.
I don't know whether you saw the footage of Trump in Scotland, where he's standing on the steps of his, whatever it is, a hotel or club or whatever it is. He's welcoming the President of the United Kingdom, of the country he's standing in, as a guest.
I know.
And he did the same thing to Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the EU.
Yeah.
This was an extraordinary display, in a sense, of American, of the United States, of the power of the United States, as indeed with the negotiations, because the EU, the EU needs the access to the United States market much more than the United States needs access to the EU market, just because it's bigger and it's more powerful. And he has really wielded the stick, and they've fallen into line.
Yeah, and there's a number of things that aren't immediately known about these deals. It includes a number of sort of systems of technology that will be exempt from tariffs coming from Europe going to the United States, particularly around transport and technology stuff.
Cars and pharmaceuticals in particular. Of course, and you never know. My view of all of these deals is you never know whether they're good deals or bad deals.
They run for a year,
So run for at least a year. For instance, the European Commission has, President von der Leyen agreed to purchase military equipment. Well, the EU doesn't have the authority to purchase military equipment on its own. She made commitments on energy, and they have no authority to do that either. So there's a whole lot of things that might just be smoke and mirrors. And in my view, it's always wise to wait at least a year to see what it actually really means in practice, and then perhaps another year to work out which economy's been a bit more light-footed and able to adjust to it and take advantage of it.
All right. And, of course, we still have the Epstein files bubbling away. Jack, Ghislaine Maxwell has appealed to Congress, pushing for a pardon so she can testify openly and honestly about the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Can I just remind people that Ghislaine Maxwell is a convicted perjurer? She was convicted of perjury offences in relation to a civil claim made by the now deceased Virginia Gough. And so she lied under oath or in her depositions there and was subsequently charged. She's also, although she's not convicted of these matters, she's also accused of not just procuring prostitutes for Epstein and possibly others, but she was involved in sexual assaults herself. Those are some of the claims, including those made by Virginia Gough. So you would have to wonder, firstly, what are you going to get here for your pardon? So it may well be going to the House Oversight to determine whether I guess Trump could offer a pardon tomorrow, couldn't he? Today.
Well, he's got the power to do so. The Speaker of the House, what's his name, Mike Johnson, said that he thought that would be a mistake, but there's no doubt the President has the power to do that.
Oh, there's no doubt at all. I mean, I think it would be. So my view on the Epstein files is that it's just got a life of its own now. It's almost organic and it's just rolling. And the worst thing I think Trump could do is do something like pardoning Maxwell or offering him. I think she's already been offered a limited pardon by the Deputy Attorney General. But it will just give it a little bit more momentum. That's this story, and just keep rolling and rolling into next year. And I think that's
Nate Silver thinks this is an online phenomenon. He doesn't think this is having any effect on the wider community. I don't know. We won't know the answer.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I would look at that and think there's a fair bit to be said there. And we've got bots and all sorts of things going on both sides. I see. The Obama-appointed judge said he wouldn't release he sought advice and then didn't release the grand jury transcripts. And there's not much in that anyway. It's basically about the prosecution of Epstein, no one else.
Yeah. But
that's all become, it's Obama and all this, like I say, it's got a life of its own now. And it's hard to know how to stop it, but what Trump doesn't want to do is just keep giving it momentum.
No. An American friend said to me last evening, just what would they have to find on Trump to make any difference to how people saw him? Because he's been around for so long and he's been considered, fairly shady, slightly grubby for a very long time. So what would the new news have to be? To make a significant difference?
I saw a podcast that addressed that issue, Jack, and I can't even tell you the name of it. But there were two blokes arguing, and they're both pro-Trump MAGA people, and one was saying, if it became known, if it became known that Trump was engaging in sexual activity with 16 or 15-year-olds, he would demand that he be prosecuted, impeached, etc., etc. The other bloke said, no, we are in very strange times where, a lot of MAGA people will go, look, he's just a red-blooded male, and all this sort of stuff. So there will be a justification.
It is an unusual situation. I don't think we've ever had a president who's been in the public eye in the way that he has for so very long before he became president. Yeah.
There's that. And it's also sort of running off, and we're just about to deal with it. We might leave the Tulsi Gabbard DOJ allegations just for today.
Well, it's more important than that.
Because it's a whole pile of nothing, really. But the Dems, have a 63% disapproval. I would say that they are wearing as much flack over Epstein as Trump and the Republicans are, Jack.
Yeah. And Kyle Smith, who's gone back to being a film critic, I think, but his comment on the high Dems disapproval rating was close to the mark. This is fun and all that, but close to meaningless. A lot of the disapproval is from very lefty voters who are very fiercely political. They show up to vote every time and would rather eat broken glass than vote Republican. It's still basically a 50-50 country, certainly not a 65-35 one or even a 55-41.
Okay. Fair. I think some of the
probably on the money.
Probably disagree on the sort of the very lefty, or if he means far left. A lot of them stayed at home in the last presidential election, Jack. Anyway, you're saying Trump's polling numbers are not great. I looked at his approval rating. When you look at the Real Clear Politics average, it can be a little bit cloudy. But half of US adult citizens have a worse view of President Donald Trump since his second term began in January, according to a new poll from YouGov. Why it matters. Trump has routinely touted positive approval ratings and polling while speaking at news conferences and campaign rallies, but declines in his numbers could ultimately hinder his political clout in an already highly polarised climate as 2026 midterms close in. Still more than 16 months away, but but a fair way away at all. And I just run through the polling stuff. This was released on Monday. US adult citizens were, why do they have to say adult? I mean, it's as if they're polling kids, mate. US adult citizens were polled whether their opinion of the president has changed since he started his second term. The poll shows 22% say they have an improved opinion of Trump, so 22% up, 24% unchanged, and 50% say they have a worse opinion. So, you know where the weakness is, Jack? It's not the Epstein files, although who knows where that's all going to end. It's the economy, and if the tariff stuff goes badly wrong, if inflation numbers go up, employment numbers go, unemployment numbers go up, that's when the pressure comes. That's when the real pressure comes. So those are the things to watch, the economic indicators in the United States. All right, you've got a little aside there. Who's Chris Matthews?
He's had his own political TV program on American television for 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And I always found him amusing. He's very much a Democrat. To this extent, when during the height of the Barack Obama campaign, I have to tell you, it's part of reporting this case, this election. The feeling most get when they hear Barack Obama's speech, I felt this thrill going up my leg. I mean, you don't get that too often. And this one was good too. I've been following politics since I was about 5. I've never seen anything like this. This is talking about Obama. This is bigger than Kennedy. Obama comes along and he seems to have the answers. This is the New Testament. This is surprising.
That's what it felt like. Yeah.
Yeah. But I saw him, Chris Matthews, interviewed by Charlie Rose. I thought Charlie Rose might have been kicked off television altogether, but he's on something on streaming.
Yeah. I do know of him.
Yeah, he was the chap who used to invite his staff to his place in the Hamptons and wander around with the bathrobe, perhaps not tied as tightly as it should have been. Yeah. It's
a bit of a right-wing, what would you call it? A bit of a right-wing practice, Jack.
I'm not even sure Charlie Rose is right wing, to be quite honest. But the Chris Matthews now is not so much lauding Trump; he's telling people how dominant a figure Trump is. He's strong. He's a stronger public figure than the Democratic people. Obama still has tremendous charisma, but Trump has strength. Voters want a president who is a strong figure, and he's got it. It's just there, and half the country buys it. Trump is a dominant political figure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, the Democrats would be going a lot better if they just stopped listening to every word he said and started setting up their own political agenda. At the moment, all they're doing is responding to what Trump says.
It's reactive, and it's reacting to every little bit of minutiae. So if I was running tactics for them, I would be saying, focus on the big stuff, focus on the big economic stuff, right? Yes, you can have your scandals, your Epstein files and all that sort of stuff. Yes, you can go hard there, but that's where you go. As it stands there for every little infraction or perceived infraction, there's just no coherent voice coming from the Democrats at the moment, and that is of concern.
So he entirely sets the agenda in American politics at the moment.
That's right. Everyone's just reacting. Well, the Democrats are just reacting to it.
And my view is that he's a good. Chris Matthews is right. He's a good political player. He's clever. He mightn't be smart, but he's shrewd. Yeah. And at the moment, they're playing dumb politics.
Well, I'd go so far as to say it's almost like there is no opposition at the moment, or that the opposition that is there that is become fixated about the cult of the personality. Only going to win this through economics, and if Trump's got his stuff wrong, if something goes wrong with the global economy, if the tariffs don't play out, and of course there's still no resolution with China at the moment, then if there's high rates of unemployment, inflation, cost of living issues still running there, then that's when Trump gets vulnerable, particularly in the midterms. And of course, the next presidential election, unless you believe some of the Democrat stuff that says he will run again for a third term, they are just falling into this. J.D. Vance will be, I presume, will be the next nominee, or one of probably the most significant nominee.
Certainly start favourite. Certainly start favourite at the beginning of the process.
It's really hard though with Trump. This is part of his, I would say, strength, political strength, is that he comes out with things that are just so odd at times. You feel like the need to react to it. And sort of everyone does this. If you listen to the podcast, Pod Save America, they always do it. They react to every little thing. And they're just sort of junior Democrats who used to work for Obama. But, yeah, it's almost impossible not to get sucked in to the debate that he controls. Moving on, Jack, the Lions versus the Wallabies at the MCG. 90,000 at the G there. The Wallabies got run down by the British Lions. I watched it, and it always looked like it was going to happen, to be honest.
It's the best performance I've seen from the Wallabies in
that first half. Brilliant, yeah.
In the best part of 20 years, and it was that's what good Australian rugby should look like, and we haven't seen for a long time. So there's a bit to hope for in that, and it was a reminder too of the importance of big, strong forwards. They got absolutely bullied in Brisbane, and you put Will Shelton in the middle of the thing, and it all changed.
Yeah.
There was a lovely moment early in the thing where he's arrived just a little bit late to challenge in a ruck, and there's a bit of a push and a shove, and he's got the Lions captain by the throat with one hand and a couple of other forwards in the other hand pushing them back, and they were making no impression on him. And
big boy.
And the refs called him over and said, you were just a teeny little bit late there, Mr. Shelton.
Sorry, sir.
And Shelton's given him a tap on the arse and walked away. It was, okay, gotcha. And,
much improved effort. The first half was great, but the second half, really early on, the Lions just went, okay, we probably didn't play at our best, and came out and scored heavily very early on, and it just looked they were just going to run them down. And
but look, this is a chance for Rugby Australia. This time, don't waste the money because the huge crowd.
Yeah, huge TV ratings.
Huge TV ratings. They'll be flowing in money again. They'll be able to pay off some of their debt, all that kind of stuff. And last time they had all this going for them was 2000 to 2005, and they wasted all the money. This time, do something sensible with it.
It's called development. It's called player development. And I can tell you that having a mate of mine who was in the New South Wales, worked for New South Wales RU, he was a development officer, and this is a number of years ago, one of two in New South Wales, Jack, and they let him go about 10 years ago. So there's one in, as far as I know, unless they've hired some since, just didn't seem to care about development of grassroots. All right, moving on to the cricket. Fantastic little blue going on at the end of the test at Old Trafford with Ben Stokes saying, look, I'll tell you when the game ends. I'll stick my hand out and you'll shake it and we'll wander off.
There's nothing wrong with him putting his hand out and offering to shake and call it a day.
No, there's nothing wrong with that, except the Indians, the two Indian batsmen, Ajay Jadeja and Washington
Sundar.
Sundar.
On 89 and 82.
So hang on just a minute. We batted most of the day, and we'd like just a little bit of time to see if we can't get a couple of hundreds with some red ink, which is perfectly fine as well. And when they made that point, that's when things got a bit unpleasant. With these guys don't seem to understand that there's stump mics out there, Jack. Some fairly unpleasant stuff. When Zach Crawley's giving you a sledge, you know things have got out of hand. This is a bloke who averages less than 30 over the last 2 years, and and then you duck it, and all, they were like a pack of wild dogs.
They were.
They're a very hard side to like, aren't they? With their 1 minute, they're bragging about their altruism to the game, their generosity of spirit, their ability to entertain, and when push comes to shove, they're just as bad as some of the ugly sides that Australia had and the South Africans have had over time. And they're just the same as everybody else. It's the difference is that they run this higher moral plane idea.
If you become sanctimonious and then you mess up, you look worse.
Much
You're
worse,
you're like the evangelical preacher, who's caught zipping into the motel with a by the hour.
A quick reminder: England hasn't beaten India, Australia, or anyone in a test. I'm just trying to think who they or New Zealand in a test series since Baz has taken over the caper, mate.
There was a nice exchange on Twitter the other day. Kevin Peterson said that for the next 3 test cycles, they should play the World Test Championship final at Lord's, because at Lord's they will be guaranteed a full house at least for the first 4 days. And Big Merv Hughes added that that's a really good idea, and it will also be a neutral venue for the competing sides. Thank you, Merv.
They needle each other. Kevin Peterson couldn't see anything wrong with the behaviour at Old Trafford. We did have another little controversy, Jack, with Gordon Gambier fronting an enormous groundsman, head groundsman. I can't think of his name, but he's a fucking giant of a man who seemed to take some umbrage that the Indian squad had or support staff had put a large esky on the ground, not anywhere near the pitches, it must be said. Took some umbrage about all of that. You can see it'd be a little empire. He'd run his own little empire. Gordon Gambier ran the old, I think he got a little bit caste system on him. You're just a groundkeeper and all this sort of stuff. Anyone who thinks both England and India are notorious pitch doctors and pitch doctors, and they're both really capable of it. And no place. I think Old Trafford's been a happy hunting ground for England over the years with doctored pitches. I think that's where Laker took his 19, wasn't it? I remember reading Benno when he saw the wicket and he almost burst into tears. It's like, you're not going to be able to bat on this. And of course, England played 2 spinners and really only needed 1. Took 19 wickets. But the Indians do it too. I think the only sense of doctored wickets that's going on in England now is just they make batting paradises.
There's not quite enough spice in them.
Not quite enough, and we had that problem here. And I wouldn't say it was part of any sort of determined effort, but we just had a lot of drop-in wickets, and I think curators were just having to deal with how they were. I mean, remember the Melbourne deck 2 years in a row was just a road, and now it's spiced up a bit. Adelaide too, Gabba first test in Perth. Of course, that's a drop-in wicket now.
And to be fair, this has been a warm summer in the UK. So I mean, normally you'd expect a few wickets where it's been a bit damp and green. So
All right, so that, in fact, as we record this on the 31st of July, the 4th test starts tonight between England and India at the Oval. It's been fantastic viewing this series, and looks like it'll go down to the wire. No Bumrah, Jack.
No, and a bit of rain about, I think, as well.
Right, so. Okay. Over to the AFL. Oh my God, the Saints coming. I watched it. I actually didn't. I was looking at the Sunday games going, the Tigers were playing Collingwood. Saints are playing Melbourne. I thought, there's just no value in any of these games. So I wandered around. I was doing a bit of work, and then I thought, I'll just watch the last quarter. but with no expectation that the D's that anything else but the D's winning would happen. They were 46 points up at 3/4 time. And I was one of those things. I was flipping through the phone. You'd look, hang on, it's only 15, only 9, only. Well, it was 18, 12, 6 level, and then my God, they've committed the 666 foul, and
they got up.
And the umpire's showing the ball to the big fella, Rowan Marshall, and they'd already sorted it out. Just run forward, Wanganeen Miller, and I'll kick it to you. And he took the mark inside 50 and then went back and goaled. I guess
it is a strange thing. I think the previous record was the 42 against Melbourne that Essendon were down in about 1992, and I was there, and I can remember your emotions go from, well, I think we kicked the first 2 or 3, and you go, oh, well, at least we're showing a bit of fight, after being belted all day. And then you go to, this is pretty good. And then with about 10 minutes to go, you go, hang on, we're a chance in this.
My wife's first game of AFL my wife watched was St Kilda coming from 41 points down to beat the Swans, 41 points down 3/4 time to beat the Swans with St Kilda. It was Tony Lockett's last year with the Saints, and he had misbehaved earlier in the game.
Peter
Coven with a compound fracture of the nose and all sorts of things. He ended up kicking 8, I think, including a handball over the top to him in an open goal where he's just slammed the footy a few old Swan supporters and knocked a few over and they got home. So it is quite amazing. It is, as you say, it's like, oh, there's a goal. Oh, it's another one. Gee, actually, it's only 4 goals difference now. And there it goes. The other big story in the AFL, Jack Silvani, will he go to Victoria Park? Well, I see the Western Bulldogs have thrown a hat in the ring, Jack.
He's been the big improver on Carlton's list this year. He's had a terrific season. The other thing about Carlton is Wanganeen Millara for the Saints was just fantastic.
I know. Yeah, I do not want him playing at the Adelaide Crows, Jack. They're good enough as it is.
But do you think that the Saints should spend the money on him rather than on Tom decoding?
I guess the Cunning offers the chance. They've got a 200-game ruckman playing for him. Rowan Marshall's a good ruckman.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah.
And so what are you going to get that's better? It might be a bit better. And he's obviously Tom is a very mobile big man and gets around, good kick, good becomes like a midfielder when the ball's on the ground. But yeah, it's like Wanganeen Miller is the best attacking halfback in the country. He's a gun.
Yeah.
But Jack Silvani have been courted by Western Bulldogs. Apparently Carlton have offered him, 4 years and 600, and Collingwood's 4 years and 700, and Carlton has said that's it, no more. So everyone's saying it's very, very likely. We'll see. It would look. Jack Silvani's entitled to do what he wants. He's been a wonderful servant for the Carlton Football Club. Let's say that first. And he's had a wonderful season as a back player. He'd be much sought after by a number of clubs because, one, he's a very capable defender. He can take a tall forward, and then he can switch forward and kick goals, take marks and kick goals. You can throw him in the ruck if you need to. He's an incredibly versatile player. Wish him well with whatever decision he wants to make. And finally, and very, very briefly, because we're running out of time, folks, the NRL finals looming. Have you seen the Panthers are back, Jack? They were second bottom on the ladder, I don't know, 6-8 weeks ago. They're they're now currently 5th. And they'll make a mess of the comp if they get run deep in the finals.
Yeah, I saw them the other day, and they were back to their ominous best.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an ominous sign for the others thinking, well, they've just had this kind of having a year off. But no, it seems that way. All right, well, that takes us out. We are running a little bit late. I did have that very long read, and I suspect that's where it's come from, but I hope it was helpful for people to understand the politics around Gaza. Thank you very much for your time today, Jack, and we just want to remind our listeners to drop us a line, as our very prominent listener at the front of the program did. If they've got any comments, criticisms, or points to make, please drop us a line. You can drop, in this case, it was done through our Facebook website, which is the conditional release posting, conditional program shit posting website. You'll find that on Facebook. You can also hit up the conditional, it's got a the in front of it, the conditional release program at gmail.com, or you can hit up Jack on his Substack.
Yeah, HongKongJack.substack.com.
By all means, feel free to hit me up on my X DMs, which is at Jack the Insider. Thanks very much for your time today, folks. We'll talk next week. See ya.